Tobias Croeso.
Shemai, you right?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. It sounds like you've had a really busy year in terms of acting, voice acting, not just in video games, but you've been part of an amazing audio drama this year called Camlann. You're the role of Di, a post-apocalyptic Welsh mythology-inspired audio drama set in Wales, so very cool. And in terms of the video games, you've actually been in more than I realized, but you've had a few pretty successful ones this year. Multiple voices in Frostpunk 2. You were Enoe in Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes.
Yes, yeah, Enoe and Forreger, and a few other
A few
random
more.
little soldiers
Yes,
as well.
not just Enoe. Yes. And Vespasius in Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2, which I believe has done exceptionally well. So you must be proud of those roles for sure this year.
It's bizarre. Like, I appreciate so much of it. Like, I feel incredibly lucky to have worked on some of the stuff that I have. Because realistically, I've not been doing this that long, if I'm honest. Like, I've been acting for a few years, but in terms of voice acting and video games and audio drama, I'm only a year or two, maybe 2.5 years into doing it. So to be able to do something like Camlann, which I adore and it, like, holds a very special place in my heart, and to work on, you know, things as huge as Warhammer with Space Marine 2 and, you know, beloved titles like Eiyuden Chronicle is mad to me. So yeah, it's been a very good year.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Eiyuden Chronicle was a Kickstarter funded game initially. So how did that work in terms of getting the voice acting role for that one? Did developers approach you, or did you sort of have to get in touch with them first?
No, so that was done through, there is a post-production company called Pit Stop Productions, which is based in Croydon in London, who are the company that worked on Eiyuden Chronicles. They also did Space Marine 2, and they did Baldur's Gate 3 as well, and they've got a lot of other titles under their belt. But yeah, in terms of me coming onto the project, it was similar to a lot of other games that I've done where you were sent sort of, you know, a couple of different characters or a batch of different voices to audition for. And you'll give all of those a go, some of those a go, whatever, you know, you fit the casting for, record those, send those off, and hope and pray and fingers crossed that you get cast in it. So yeah, it was a pleasure to work on. And yeah, the Kickstarter for it was absolutely bizarre because I have to be honest, I wasn't aware of the franchise until beginning working on it. But I know that it comes from, you know, a long-living franchise from a while before. And it became, I think, either one of the fastest or one of the highest funded projects on Kickstarter.
That's right. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's like the third highest behind Cymru 3 and something else that I can't recall.
Which is incredible. So yeah, to be able to be a part of that world, I guess, that so many people hold dear, and, you know, be the English voice for a few of those characters is, yeah, absolutely wonderful.
I've got to throw this one out there as well, but I didn't realize that my wife is obsessed with AFK Arena, and I didn't realize you were the voice of Thane. It's just a minor role, but I've in my little research of you seeing the roles you've done, I saw that, and I just like, it's like she's always playing it every night, and I just thought, oh my god, he's the voice of a character. There's like a million characters in that game, and you are one of them.
Oh yeah, it's a massive game. I can't even remember. I think that was one of the first ones I did.
It looks like one of the first.
Yeah, and I can't remember. I don't know where I place in it, because I think when I did it, it was primarily for cutscene usage and for some marketing stuff as well. And yeah, I didn't realize again until looking into it. It's like, oh, there are so many people in this, and this is such a played thing. I was just sort of like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it slipped me by, but it seems like there are still thousands of people playing that thing today. It's been going for so long, but yeah, so congratulations for that as well.
Thank you.
But yeah, just before we sort of properly get into the main questions that I sort of want to get to, just give us a bit of a background on where in Wales you come from, and I know that you know, you enjoy video games as well. So what sort of games did you enjoy as you were growing up and still play today even?
So I grew up in Pembrokeshire, in West Wales. Tyfilan iaith gyntaf Cymraeg. I was a first language Welsh speaker growing up, going to first language Welsh schools. And yeah, after that, I guess life-wise, left to study at Manchester School of Theatre. I went there 2012 to 2015, and very much had. It feels very cliche to say, but very much had hiraeth and wanted to like come back to Wales and try and pursue work in Wales. And I think a large part of that being a Welsh speaker was just sort of like, I'd love to try and pursue more work in the Welsh language and stuff like that. And that felt, coming back to Wales was one of the ways to do that. So I moved to Cardiff in 2015 and have been there ever since. But yeah, I would love to move back to Pembrokeshire maybe when I'm a bit older. And, public transport is a little bit easier.
Yes, definitely. So what about in terms of video games? What did you enjoy growing up?
It was kind of a mix of everything. Like, I think I've played ever since I was like 3 or 4. Like, I just have memories of just someone going like, "Here, give this a go." And I remember, so I was born in Essex, but all of my family, both sides, is Welsh, and we moved to Pembrokeshire, I think, when I just turned 4. And first lived in Kilgarran in Pembrokeshire, Ceredigion, and then moved to Pembrokeshire. But our neighbour, growing up when I was very little in Essex, had a Super Nintendo. And I remember playing Donkey Kong and stuff like that on it. I was going like, I am addicted to this. I want one of these, because we didn't have any consoles or anything like that. So then the second I was old enough, and I think Christmas came around, I was like, I want a console. And I think the first one I got was a PS1, like I think a lot of people my age. And just everything. I think with all of the sort of like mascot characters, I adored Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Croc. And then my brother was Nintendo growing up, so he ended up getting a N64. So I adored playing like Mario 64, Bomberman, Glover. I remember loving on that. And just, yeah, a lot of platformers and sort of mascot characters are sort of my earliest memories. And then getting a little bit older and sort of moving into later generations like PS2 into Xbox 360 and stuff like that, I played a lot of Halo and Gears of War as a kid for probably far too long. Like, I don't want to go back and look at those hours for how long that was played. But especially living in the middle of nowhere, just sort of like, I'll just play a game. And then, yeah, beyond that, like the Arkham series and stuff like that. And I adored the Fable games, Luigi's Mansion. I could list games forever, to be honest.
Sure. Yeah, I can relate to a lot of the mascot games growing up. Then it sounds like you'd get along really well with my wife in terms of the Arkham games, the Gears games, all of that. She loves all of that. So, but yeah, I totally agree with you. You've been streaming on Twitch lately, and it's been nice to try and, although the time zone's currently on too great for between me in Texas and back home in Wales, but I try to hop in when I can. So it's been a joy just to see you playing Luigi's Mansion in particular. And
it's been a fascinating experience playing for an audience, because it's something I've never done, and it's a lot of fun. But that realization of like, I'm going to play something which is incredibly precious to me, and then you play it in front of people, and you suddenly feel like, I can't play games.
Yeah,
everyone's watching now, and I can't do what I used to do.
Yeah, the pressure, and it was interesting watching you play Luigi, actually, because even I was like, I don't even remember how to beat. How did I do this as a kid? I don't remember anything. I don't know how I beat
that game.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So many times, I think I completed it 4 or 5 times in my lifetime. Put it on, people watching, like, right, I've forgotten everything. Where are we going? I don't know what we do. Like, it just goes instantly.
Yeah, you've delved into just a bit about how you got into acting, but is that something that you always wanted to do from a young age? You didn't really have any other sort of aspirations in anything else? It sounds like it's something you always wanted to do, and it's nice to see that you're doing it.
Yeah, I do think, like, my parents would probably say, just like, yeah, it's all I've ever really wanted to do. I think there was a brief flirtation with the idea of being a vet at one point when I think I was like 9 or 10. And my parents explained what you'd have to go through being a vet. And I am I adore animals. And I think if I had worked in that medium as a vet, I wouldn't have lasted very long. I think the second I had to deal with anything, heartbreaking, I would
Yeah.
be like, I can't do this anymore. So
Yeah.
respect to vets and anyone that works in medicine
Absolutely.
of any kind. But yeah, it is from a very young age. I think it is what I wanted to do. Like I said, play games ever since I was little. I think when I was younger, I didn't really realize voice acting was a career because it wasn't really advertised. Like I remember when I reached the age to apply into drama schools and stuff like that, it was all theatre and screen, and still more theatre than screen at that point, because it was the thing of going, you'll tread the boards and learn Shakespeare and all of this, and it would be the West End or anything like that. And I adore that, and I still adore working in the theatre. And when I get a chance to, I adore it. Like it's an incredible experience, I think, unlike anything else. But voice acting was never something that people were like, yeah, you can just do that as a job. That is something you can pursue. But I think the first time when I was younger, when I sort of thought, oh, I'd love to do that, even if I didn't have the concept of it as a job, was listening to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy audio drama from, I think I must have been like 7 or 8. And I was a huge fan of sci-fi growing up. So having the combination of like sci-fi comedy from that age, being like, I love this. This is amazing. And I think it was my first understanding of like the worlds that you can create just with audio and the sort of thing you can do that it conjures up. Similar with books. Like if you're reading a book and you can picture this world in your head, the things that voice actors, directors, and sound designers and anyone in that medium can conjure up to make you feel like you're there, or you can picture that location, completely changed my perspective of it. And I was sort of like, I would love to do that. And then I think the Fable games were probably one of the first game series where I was like, there are so many actors in these. Because they had, I'm trying to think, Fable 2 had like Simon Callow, Nick Frost, Simon Pegg, lots more. Like there were tens of British actors in those games. I was like, oh, they do this. This is a thing people can do. Oh, okay. And then I went to drama school and graduated. And the very first job I got was in a game called Fable Legends. And this was back in 2016. I was like, oh, you can do this. This is the thing you could do. And I went and recorded that. It was at Shepperton Studios. Amazing experience. I was playing a Welsh character who was one man pretending to be 2 twin brothers by literally going like, oh, let me just go and fetch my brother. It'll be 2 seconds, going out, putting on a mustache, coming back. And he was like, hello, yes, I'm the surgeon. And it was incredible. But sadly, the game was cancelled before it released. Yeah. And Lionshead, who were the original studio behind the Fable games, went under. And I will caveat that with, I'm so glad that they are making a new Fable game, because that franchise needs to stay alive. But yeah, so that kind of was it until maybe 3 years ago when I first started going again, okay, maybe I can try and pursue this again and look at it. And lockdown hit and all other acting work disappeared and went out the window. I was like, okay, this is the time to sort of knuckle down and pursue this. And sorted a laptop, sorted a mic, I've got a home recording booth, which is basically a boiler cupboard that I've gutted and it's got loads of soundproofing in it. And yeah, kind of went from there. I think I half answered your question and then went off on a tangent. So
no, more than answered it. No, I really appreciate that. So yeah, so in terms of the voice acting, obviously growing up playing games as well, I assume voice acting in games is something you kind of ultimately would like that. Would that be the peak thing in terms of the acting world, or was there anything in terms of acting that you still aspire to really try and achieve?
Be the Doctor, which I think is any little kid who watched Doctor Who growing up being like, I want to be that. So I don't know if it's my acting brain or my child brain being like, that's what I want to be. But to be honest, being in Doctor Who of any kind, be that on screen or audio drama with the Big Finish productions or anything like that, because I think it's an iconic series. But I also think since, the second iteration of it starting in 2005, it was an iconic part of Wales.
Yes,
because it just became so synonymous with media happening in Wales, and it sort of put Cardiff and the surrounding areas on the map in terms of one, platforming, I think, Welsh writers and directors, with people like Eros Lynn and stuff like that going on to direct loads of more stuff, and Rusty Davis, obviously, but Welsh actors as well. Because I remember, watching bits and bobs of things like Pobla Cum and stuff growing up, and then seeing those actors in this huge primetime, Saturday show and being like, there are so many Welsh people in this. And yeah, so again, tangent off of that, but yeah, anything Doctor Who. But yeah, I think games was always a dream to be in. I just didn't necessarily think it was achievable or a career path, because it just wasn't taught to us, even at drama school. It wasn't something where people said, you can have a career in this. But I also think that's because when I was training, it wasn't as global a medium as it is now.
Yeah.
I think obviously it's always been huge and had fans from, very young ages carrying on through to adulthood and beyond. But I don't think it was necessarily considered a career as an actor to work in games. Whereas now, you've got absolutely iconic titles, platforming actors, and, making them household names off of video games. Or you have already huge household names wanting to move into video games and work in video games. So I think it's come on leaps and bounds, which is incredible.
Yeah. So by that extent, do you feel that things have changed a little bit in terms of people moving into the acting world, where voice acting in games is sort of a main encouraged line of work within the acting world, as opposed to back when you started out?
Absolutely. I think it sort of comes hand in hand with a couple of different things. I think the arts in general, like a lot of industries, is struggling post-COVID, because it's, that word. But everything's still trying to recover. So there are theatre projects that are either only happening now that were supposed to happen pre-COVID, or never happened. So that money was lost. Same with screen, same with loads of different things where, so much money was lost, and then other stuff just couldn't get funded. So less and less things got made. And I think a lot of people left the industry, be that, runners, directors of photography, backstage, actors, so many people had to leave because it was just not feasible to continue to try and work in it. But I think beyond that, things like games have sort of grown and grown. And I think caveat that with games industry is still in a struggle in itself, because I know there's so many studios where developers and things like that, their staff have been hemorrhaged from companies because they've had to be budget cuts and stuff like that. So I feel so much for so many animators, developers, different people who worked in studios that were let go. And some of those have gone on to, develop their own little indie studios or work at different places, which is great. But so many of them are still out of work, and, it's awful. Like it's really, really difficult, I think, in the industry at the moment. And there's still strikes going on in America as well, because SAG-AFTRA are striking against certain video game companies for fair pay and things to do with AI and stuff like that, which I hope gets settled soon, and that something can come of that, which is good for both the creatives and the actors and the companies themselves, and that something can be worked out. I'm going off on tangents so much.
No, you're fine. No, it makes me think around that COVID time, the Welsh acting industry, in terms of the Welsh language programs, I imagine that must have been a really tough time for Welsh speaking shows and programs as well.
I think, yeah, it was difficult. I think it was just an all-rounder thing. I think there were Welsh language productions that struggled, but I think at that point, a lot of the stuff that was still going was long-standing projects that I think had either a fan base or a strand of funding where they could sort of build themselves back up. So you had things like Pobla Cum, Round Around, which could continue. But I do think beyond that, a lot of Welsh language stuff is going from strength to strength, because you've got a lot of stuff now that is being translated into English because it's been so popular. Like things like Hinterland. What is the other one? There's one with Eve Miles, the name of which has gone completely... Un Bore Mercher is the Welsh name, and I cannot remember the English name because it is not a direct translation. But so many projects that gained an audience, and then English speakers wanted to watch, and it was translated and created, as its own medium, which is brilliant. So I think at this point it's going strength to strength again. But as well, to go back to your previous question as well about video games and stuff like that, and it growing. I think one of the brilliant things that COVID did, in a sense, or that came out of COVID, COVID did no brilliant things, but it came out of COVID, was that people realized that it's a far more accessible medium than I think a lot of other stuff. I think with that, it's something you have to be able to afford to do, because if you're doing it yourself from home, obviously you need a laptop or a computer that can run software and, edit things. You need a mic that's of good enough quality. You need a space that is able to do it and is not going to have echo or anything like that. But if you have all of that and you're a wheelchair user, or you're somebody with an immune system issue, you can work from home, and you're in an environment which a lot of other creative aspects of the industry can't accommodate and can't facilitate for. I would say, again, so many production companies do incredible things where, they are able to make it as accessible as possible for anybody to do. But I think the fact that audio as a medium, more so than anything else, you can work from home if you have the setup, is brilliant, and just is more accessible for so many more people.
You make a great point there. But yeah, in terms of being Welsh, knowing the Welsh language, I know you've been a part of a number of Welsh-speaking programs as well over the years. Has that benefited you in gaining video game roles? Has developers been interested in that at all whenever they look at your CV?
I would say no. And I think primarily that's just because there's not really been all that much Welsh language in video games. I think there's been some brilliant Welsh characters and things like that, but I wouldn't necessarily say there's been all that much Welsh language, really. I think there's been... I'm trying to remember. I remember playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I think there's some Welsh language in that.
Yes. Some old Brittonic, old Welsh, I believe, yes.
Yeah, which I was so shocked by, because I remember playing that game, and another actor friend of mine, Joseph Tweedale, is in that, Welsh actor who plays a couple of soldiers and different voices within it. And I just remember listening, going, hang on, was that Welsh? Because it's not until you get to a certain area of the map and there's one of the castles and you see the flags and the shields, and like, wait, this is like old Wales.
Yes.
Hang on. And it was incredible, because I had no idea about it, and discovering that was... I felt so happy, because I was just sort of like, oh, I didn't know. And obviously Assassin's Creed is a huge franchise. So the idea that there could be, millions upon millions of people playing that game who had no idea about Wales or the Welsh language or, any of that history, seeing that is like, that's great. That's another little tick on the map sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's something that, obviously, the point with Wales in games is I'm trying to sort of highlight those little instances, however big or small, of Welsh representation in games. And, if there's anything I feel like I could do to try and highlight Wales in some way, and in make people learn about it, because there are people interested in Wales, and particularly in America. It's kind of interesting that most of my audience in terms of the videos are Americans, and it kind of fascinates me. Yeah. And there is a strong Welsh history in America, and obviously not sort of a great history when you talk about colonization and things like that, but they're obviously little Welsh communities that developed within places like America, and I feel like there's a lot of people that are interested in their ancestral roots, and when you look into it, there are little Welsh references. I'm surprised by how many there are actually over the years, little Welsh references. But in terms of all the history that Wales has, and the fact that the language is still going so strong today, one of the oldest in Europe, there's not enough, and I'm always surprised by that, really. And I find it both brilliant and sad at the same time that a franchise like Assassin's Creed is what it's taken for kind of people to learn about Wales, to be, to hear the language in the game. I know there's been other little attempts here and there, and indie developers today are doing amazing work with that, and it's so pleasing to see. But it just feels like we really should have more than what we have in terms of major games, at least. So I hope that we do get there with everything.
I think we will. I think we will. Yeah. I think a lot has come on. I think one of the biggest leaps I've seen within Welsh characters in games, or representation of Welsh characters across different things is that it's not always the comic relief. And I think that's across a lot of regional characters, be it, Cornish, Irish, Scottish, anything like that. I think there was a certain point in time where those characters were represented as the buffoon or the comic relief, and it would always be that thing. And a lot of the time they would make them stupid characters. It was always the way. And I think, there is a place for those sort of characters. Some of the best characters in Shakespeare are the idiots and the fool, and they can be brilliant. But I think it always was a thing that they were represented in a very particular way. And I think that happens a lot with Welsh, where it's an accent thing. Absolutely. So I remember, a few years ago auditioning for stuff, and I would audition in my accent, and they'd be like, "Oh no, can we have a Welsh accent, please?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I am Welsh. My accent is Welsh." And they're like, "No, we want a Welsh accent." It's like, "All right, you want that, don't you? You want sort of valleys, what the general perception of the Welsh accent is." And that would be everyone's perception outside of it of what the Welsh accent was. And I'm sort of like, there are so many dialects.
Absolutely.
Between, again, there's the other side where people are just like, well, yeah, there's South Walian, North Walian. It's like, no. South Walian, North Walian, Mid Wales, West Walian, and then dialects in between that. Like, even between Cardiff and the valleys, Cardiff and Newport, the difference in accent is massive.
Yeah.
But it's this assumption, I think, that because either people didn't know enough about it, or they wanted just a generalized thing that would read in a particular way for people that didn't know the accent, they would just go with that one strand of accent, which, on the one hand, I get. On the other hand, I'm like, no, more representation, better representation. And I think
Absolutely.
Elden Ring was great for that, because I think Elden Ring had some incredible Welsh actors in it, and they weren't overplayed. I think so much of the acting in that game is understated.
Yeah.
And the accents are quite soft from some of the characters, be it Blythe or Rani and stuff like that. And yeah, it felt like a sort of shift for me in games in the way Welsh accent was represented, which was
definitely
lovely
appreciated.
to see.
Yeah. It's a funny one, actually, because I'm Welsh as well. And yet maybe the average person might not know that I'm from the North Wales coast. So I've got that kind of weird mixture of almost Scouse and Welsh. I don't even know what the heck you'd want to call it, honestly. But I like to think that there is a bit of Welshness in there that you can detect. But it's weird for when I'm actually trying to do a bit of research on certain games, and I know there's a Welsh actor or actress that plays a character, and then I'm listening to the character, and it's not your typical South Walian boyo accent like you just described there. And I'm like, so are they doing a Welsh accent or not? And even I'm questioning in my head, well, what determines a Welsh accent? We know there are many Welsh accents. So I'm questioning myself on how do I represent this information? Do I just say there's a Welsh actor that plays a character? I don't know if it's a Welsh accent, but like you said, I totally agree. And that's the whole point, really, is that we're far more than just that accent. There's so much to us, and like you said, I do feel like we're getting there slowly, not as quick as I'd like, but we're moving in the right direction, I feel.
Definitely.
So hopefully we'll get there. In terms of Welsh representation in games and within general media, do you feel like there's anything that the two can learn from each other in terms of TV mediums and looking at what we can learn from that?
I think just more Welsh stories, because I think there's some great representation now across games of Welsh voices, or there's more than ever before. I think a lot of Welsh voices working in games, be it not necessarily Welsh characters, but myself, Jack Ayres, Joe Tweedale, there are so many, Kezia Burrows, there are so many Welsh voices across games now, which is incredible. I think I remember the first time discovering your website and looking through the list and sort of going like, there are so many more voices than I thought in games. And it just made me incredibly happy. So I think that's going from strength to strength to strength. I think there could just be more focus on maybe Welsh stories and Welsh history and setting things within Wales that has roots in Wales and not necessarily just sort of going like, well, this is a pretty area of Wales, we'll set it here, but it has nothing to do with it, sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think there are some things doing that. I know that there's a game coming. I can't remember if it's Tales of the Mabinogion or Tales from the Mabinogion, which looks incredible. Like they're doing a very particular art style, which looks really interesting, and obviously drawing inspiration from the Mabinogion and looking at Welsh folklore and stuff like that. Again, when I was a kid, I never thought I'd see anything like that happening in the realm of games. And to even see something like that now being developed is incredible, but more like that. I'd love to see more things like that, because I think you could have, things like, I don't know, Shadow of the Colossus, or things like From Software games, that if they had a Welsh setting specifically, would be incredible, because there's so much about, within Camlann, for instance, obviously that talks about Arthuriana and folklore and stuff like that within Wales. There's so much you can have from that, with giants and with water horses and fairies, and that could be incredible. One of my favorite facts, I think, from folklore is certain words in the English language that are Welsh originally. So for instance, things like penguin is a Welsh word, being whitehead, which no one knows, but then words like corgi, which the original etymology of it means dwarf dog. And there's pictures from years ago of people doing artwork of like fairies riding corgis, because they would have them as like horses to go into battle. I want to see that in a game.
Yeah.
I want to see you play as a fairy riding a corgi. Like that'd be incredible. So I think it's going from strength to strength. Yeah. But I think there could still be more.
I agree with you. That sort of leads into the question of what you would like to see in terms of Welsh representation, but you kind of went into that. Yeah. What's
more
the
corgis in games?
There's a Welsh folkloric fairy, Ellillon, which are little elves.
Yes.
If I've got that right, I think
it's either a Llillon or a Llylon.
You probably got it.
Can't remember either.
Yeah. Maybe seeing them riding some little corgis would be hilarious, but
incredible.
But it kind of makes me think of something like God of War, which obviously, Greek gods, and there's talk about potential of taking it into Egyptian mythology, and you think we've got some of the most amazing mythology and stories and tales, some of the oldest written tales in all of Europe, and you just think it's right in front of your faces. Imagine what the sort of stories that you can tell, because the fact is, they're stories, they're tales, they're not fact, they're fiction, they're just made up. So you can do what you like with it. If you want to turn them into these giant gods that you do battle with and climbing on their heads, you could do that. Why not? So
I'd love to see Shadow of the Colossus with things like Gelert, and I'd love that. And I think like you said, it's fictional. There are things people can draw from or draw inspiration from, and then do their own thing with it, as long as it has that root within, the original tales and stuff like that. And I think, there's so much that could be tapped into that people might not even necessarily know is Welsh.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, there's all the stuff I was saying about the names of words like penguin and corgi and stuff like that. But obviously, you've got things like Myrddin, being Merlin. Because so many people think was like, oh, well, Merlin is rooted in English folklore and stuff like that. It's like, well, no, technically Arthur and Merlin are Welsh. There's literally Carmarthen. The Welsh name is Caerfyrddin, and it means Merlin's fort. So there is the whole history within the country and within folklore, which is so intertwined that I think there's so much potential. I would just love to see more.
Yeah, I agree with you. The King Arthur tales in particular, they've been anglicized so much to the point that you don't even realize that they're Welsh tales anymore, which is quite unfortunate, really. And
that's why I will say Ella Watts, I think, who was the writer and director of Camlann, is doing wonders for Wales in terms of Camlann, because she has Welsh heritage with her nan and stuff like that, but she's not from Wales. She just has a massive love of the language and of the history and all of that. And I think, she's platforming a lot of that with Camlann and things like that. So if we could see more things like Camlann in games, that'd be great. I'd love that.
I mean, I don't know if there's any sort of Welsh mythology figures that you feel like you would love to voice yourself, or who would you like to see in sort of any type of game? Like, if you could just make up a sort of Welsh character that you could just play as. Can you think of anything?
I would love to see a game where you play as Gelert from the Mabinogion and is voiced, and I would voice Gelert, because I think that story is heartbreaking. And I won't go into the details of it for anyone watching this who wants to go and read it, because I think you need to experience it as a story rather than somebody just, verbatim explaining it, because it's heartbreaking. But, the kind of stuff that character as a dog goes through, and that journey and the relationship they have, I think there is so much scope there to have them as a character. Because obviously you have games like Stray and things like that, which I think did wonders for, we could have an animal as a lead character, and you can follow them and sort of have an emotional connection to them that you might not have thought you could have with an animal as the protagonist. So maybe something like Stray, but with Gelert, and it's in, medieval folklorian times. If anyone's watching and they want to make that, I will happily voice Gelert. So
Tobias will gladly voice a dog. So
anytime. I've voiced a dog before in a game. So
have you? What was that? Was that the VR game by any chance?
No. I am the. So many people thought I'm the dog, but because so that's a game called Epyka, and because the character you play as is obviously the headset, so you are that character. It's just a disembodied voice. So people have thought I'm the dog, and it's like, no, the dog is my dog in the game. But no, there is a game coming out, I think next year, called The Beekeeper's Picnic, where I voiced Toby III. And that is all I will say. I'm allowed to talk about it because it's not under NDA. But yeah, if you keep an eye out for that game, because there's some brilliant voice acting in that, and the animation looks gorgeous.
I think that I've been surprised. I love fighting games. I'm awful at them, hopeless at them, but I love them. And I've been so surprised that throughout all fighting game history, all the nationalities of characters, there's not been a single, to my knowledge, Welsh character in a fighting game. And I just find that so shocking. So I just think there has to be, at some point, I don't care if it's your stereotypical Welsh woman with a giant top hat and a dress with a giant leek that smashes people up. I don't care, as long as there's a Welsh character in a fighting game. You can voice it for all I care. I don't care. Just
I'll do
whatever. I'm just so surprised there's not been a single Welsh fighting game character. That has to happen, surely. That would be my.
I would love to see that. I would love to see even a sort of like anthropomorphic human hybrid of the Welsh dragon. As some sort of like, I don't know. Was Joe Calzaghe a Welsh boxer? I'm trying to think of like a Calzaghe dragon hybrid. Have that in a game.
Maybe that could be Gelert. Maybe it could be a giant dog as well or something. We just, who cares at this point? We just need Welsh representation.
Yes.
Well, that's probably a fair point to end on. But yeah, Tobias, no, I really appreciate you joining me just for that little chat, and let us know where people can follow you online. And I believe you've got a new website up now. So just let people know.
So you can follow me on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. Capital T, capital W, Weatherburn. So T Weatherburn. Instagram, Tobias_Weatherburn. I'm on Blue Sky. I can't remember what the @@ is.
I'll link everything.
Yeah, it's there somewhere. I'm on Twitch as Tobias Weatherburn VO. And yeah, I have a new website. Just type in www.tobias-weatherburn.co.uk and you'll find me. And yeah, thank you for chatting to me. Like, I love what you do, and I think it's brilliant that stuff like this is being catalogued and looked at and put out into the wider world. So, props to you, and Diolch for doing the work that you do, and yeah, putting more of Wales on the map in video games.
Diolch yn fawr. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much, Tobias, and I love your work. Hopefully, we'll keep seeing you in more video games to come. Good luck with everything else, and hopefully, we can chat again in the future after you've done a few more roles, and we'll see where Wales is at in terms of the industry, and maybe you've already voiced Gelert or some weird Welsh woman with a giant leek dragon on her head. I don't know, but
Oh,
we'll
fingers
see.
crossed. It's in the ether now, so hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully someone's listening or pick that idea up. We want some royalties though.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Tobias. Take care.
Thanks so much. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.